Okay, folks, this is Book Talk with Corbin. I'm your host. We more often than not do a lot of political and cultural issues, but today we're going to sort of go off kilter a little bit and speak about sickle cell. It's a very serious health problem here in the United States. Doesn't get the publicity it really deserves. So we're going to talk to the president of the Sickle Cell Association of Kentuckiana, Rebecca Sievers. And we're just going to ask her a few questions about sickle cell and ask her, talk to her about ways that people can battle sickle cell or help people with sickle cell. Okay. First of all, let's start off the Sickle Cell Association of Kentuckiana. How long has that organization been in existence?
The organization has been around for 22 years. Dr. Illestad, who was a bone marrow doctor, your niece Jessica McDowell had met her when she was like 16, 17, because she was doing a lot of work on bone marrow transplants curing sickle cell. And she had asked Jessica, and I never forget, Jessica was like, well, you always said it's my body, it's my decision, and she didn't want to do it. She did have a perfect match, which was her brother, Jason. And she said there just wasn't enough research on the success of the bone marrow. It was fairly new here in Louisville, Kentucky. Like I said, Jessica was 16, 17 at the time. She's 32 years old now. So you're talking about like 16 years ago. And one of the nurses up there, where Jessica used to get her monthly blood transfusion, said, they're not telling you the whole thing. There were some children who had passed away from having that procedure. It was like they were using people as, I don't want to say nothing negative because I love the doctors here, but they were using them as test monkeys. Like they really didn't know. It was like a test and go situation. Let's see how this will go. And she just didn't want to do it. But anyway, Dr. Illestad started the organization with Ann Northrup helped her a lot. And they were getting ready to close their doors until Daphne Matthews Johnson, who had sickle cell herself, kept it from closing. And she took over. And so we're in our 22 years. We weren't able to celebrate our 20th year because of COVID. So next year we'll be able to celebrate. It'll be 23 years next year, but we're going to do a big celebration because we weren't able to do it.
And what was you said that a doctor founded the organization. What was the original mission of the organization? What was he trying to accomplish with the establishment of the organization?
She was just trying to accomplish that there needed to be an awareness. There were several families here. At the time, I think it was 170 families that she knew of, and there wasn't no talk about sickle cell. There wasn't no literature on sickle cell. I'll never forget when I called the National Institute of National Institute Heart Institute. The last sickle cell book they had written was over 10, 11 years. And I called them exactly 3 years ago about a book, some literature. And there just wasn't nothing written on sickle cell. And they had expressed that. Now you find more and more companies getting involved, like Indari. They're the first company that came out with a medicine in the past, in over 20 years for sickle cell. There was no medicine for sickle cell in the past 20 years. It was hydroxyurea, or you could do the bone marrow transplant. And that was the only medicines you could do. But now you have Indari, you have Oxtrata, now we have two medicines, which still there isn't a lot. We need to have a wealth of medicines for sickle cell. There needs to be more money put into sickle cell for research and other resources.
So the doctor established a group to sort of help people understand what sickle cell is and different treatments, and maybe to encourage folks to do more research into sickle cell treatment. Is it possible for sickle cell to be quote unquote cured?
No, there's no cure for sickle cell. Some people can do a bone marrow transplant. There's also some gene therapy. There's no cure for sickle cell. There's just no cure. And there have been success stories with the bone marrow transplant. There's been success stories with the gene therapy, but a lot of people are finding out with some of those success stories. Bluebird was one company that did a lot of work on it, and coming to find out, these sickle cell patients that went through their gene therapy, they're starting to be diagnosed with cancers 3 and 4 and 5 years later. So,
and obviously sickle cell, I mean, must be quite serious. I mean, if you're talking about
it
bone
is. It's
marrow.
very, it's very.
So what exactly is it?
Sickle cell is a blood disorder. Most people have round cells. People with sickle cell have a cell that looks like a banana or a sickle that you use out in the yard. And it's of a group of inherited red blood cells. You have your healthy red blood cells, which are round, and they move through blood vessels to carry oxygen to all parts of the body. But when that sickle one comes through, the C-shaped farm tool that could call a sickle, the sickle cells die early, which causes a constant shortage of red blood cells in a sickle cell person's body. And when that happens, they end up calling what they call crisis, C-R-I-S-I-S. And they die early, they travel through small blood vessels, and they get stuck and clog the blood flow. And so, here you are with someone you have this sickle in your body, your arms, your legs, your chest, your head, blood's not able to flow through. So that's what causes a crisis. If it happens in your chest, they call that an acute crisis. It's serious. You can cause pain and other serious complications such as infections, acute chest syndrome, and stroke. Like if you're not getting the blood flow in your brain, or, your brain's not getting oxygen, you can have a stroke.
Now, I'm not sure. I can't remember the name of the young lady. She was with some pretty famous pop group.
Oh, yeah. T-Boz.
Yeah, we go. I read her book, and
T-Boz, yeah.
what I picked up from her was that when she would have what you just described as a crisis, she could not function. Period.
Mm-mm.
She couldn't move.
It's very crippling. Your great niece, my granddaughter, when she was young, her hands would swell up. They call it the hand-feet syndrome. She couldn't hold her bottle. As she got older, she couldn't hold her cup, her sippy cup, because her hands are swollen. Her feet would swell up, so she would just crawl or scoot her body around to get around. It's very, Miles Davis had it, and he had a lot of problems with his hips. And you probably couldn't tell it the way he performed, but if you really look at some close video footage of Miles Davis, you could tell he kind of moves slow and he favors that one hip. He kind of pulls back or leans forward, and you could tell the way he walked and held himself, it caused him a lot of pain. And in those days, they didn't have hydroxyurea for a lot of these sickle cell patients. They did over-the-counter pain meds, or they went to drugs like heroin and cocaine or alcohol. One of the temptations, he was an alcoholic due to his sickle cell because the pain was so immense, he drunk himself.
So you just named 3 rather famous people, and they're all Black. Does sickle cell disproportionately impact Black Americans?
Yes, it does, but you can find it in the Caribbean, Central America, Saudi Arabia, India, Turkey, Mediterranean countries, Greece, Italy. You can find it in other countries. It just impacts African Americans and in Africa more.
Mm-hmm. And do they have any
Hispanics too? I'm sorry, it impacts about 1,400 Hispanics in America. But you also have to understand a lot of these numbers are old numbers. It said it affects approximately 100,000 people in the United States, and the CDC has been holding on to that number for the past 10 years. So we know the number's more than that.
So, okay, so you suspect it's impacting more than 100,000?
Yes.
Okay. So, in these other countries, are their treatments any better, worse, about the same?
It just depends where you're at. I know here in Louisville, when they tore down General Hospital, there wasn't a clinic here for over 30 years. And that's too long. That's just imagine somebody white having a disease like that. Do you really think certain, I'm not going to name no names, I don't like doing that, big time people, white people, Caucasian people here are going to let that happen to their community? I mean, Dr. Glisson, who is one of the hematologists here in town, and his wife, Vicki Glisson, who used to be Secretary of State, they fought for there to be an adult clinic. There was no adult clinic here till 5 years ago. There was none. We had a young man with sickle cell that was driving to Nashville, to Vanderbilt to get help. It's ludicrous.
So
and
when you say
one
that,
time,
so when you say he was traveling to Nashville to get help, what was he going for, the pain medication or?
yes, they had a clinic down there, and that's where he had to go because there was nothing here. The hospitals here looked at them as drug seekers. And because you get looked at as a drug seeker, oh, here he is again to get the drugs, ain't nothing wrong with him. They got tired of going. People get tired of being talked to and looked at as a drug addict, and they're not. They're in pain. On his way down one time, he lost control of his car. He got in really bad pain, and a semi hit him, and he got killed instantly.
Wow.
His twin brother, who has sickle cell too, survived, but he ended up dying from sickle cell about 3-4 years later.
Wow. Is there any way people can find out if they have sickle cell, or they just hit the crisis and boom, that's how they find out?
What happened to me was I was having a lot of pain, and my doctor said, I think you have sickle cell. She tested me, and that's when she found out I had the trait. And I reached out to my mother. Our father was dead, so I couldn't reach out to dad, and she didn't do it. And, go to your doctor and get the test for sickle cell trait or the disease. If they don't feel like you have the disease, say, well, I want to be tested for the trait because my mate might have the trait. If you have the trait and they have the trait, which happened to my kid's father, he didn't know he had sickle cell trait. I didn't know I had sickle cell trait. We ended up having 6 kids together. It took our youngest one to get sick. Our last 3 kids have what you call sickle cell SC disease. I have the S trait, he had the C trait, and that's why our kids have the SC disease.
Oh, wow. Okay, man.
Just
So
like
it's
with
important.
Jessica's kids, she has sickle cell. She had sickle cell disease, SC. Her kid's father had the S trait. And because she had SC disease and he had the S trait, that's why their kids have SS disease.
Okay. So it's important for men and women.
Get
Just go
tested.
get
I don't
checked
care
out.
if you're white, Hispanic, I need a sickle cell trait testing because it's now coming out. Sickle cell trait can cause you some serious problems. Football, the high altitude, a lot of the 4 main causes of sports deaths are heart, your head, and your hemoglobin, which is the sickle cell trait. There's another one. I can't think of it right now. I'm sorry. But those are the 4 main ones. And that hemoglobin is very important with these athletes who have sickle cell trait. These coaches need to understand, and they need to know. I think now in pro football and basketball, they do the test.
Okay, great. Folks, this is Book Talk with Corbin. I'm your host. I'll have this interview and other interviews like it, similar to it, at my website, booktalkwithcorbin.com. We're speaking today with Rebecca Sievers. She's the president of the Sickle Cell Association of Kentuckiana. We're gonna wrap up with just 2 last questions. One, how can people get a hold of the Sickle Cell Association of Kentuckiana?
You can get a hold of us at 502-569-2070. Please check out our website at thesacky.org. We're having many events. During COVID, we weren't able to have as many events as we would like to have. And those are the ways you can get a hold of me. You can also have my private cell phone number, which is 502-338-0102.
Okay. And last question here. During COVID, was it particularly hard for sickle cell folk, or it was about the same, or what?
I heard the doctor say, a sickle cell patient having COVID is like having acute chest. I mean, I remember when my daughter almost died from acute chest at 17. It is ungodly pain. It was hard for her to breathe. She was on breathing machines. She was only breathing at 77%. So just imagine you walk around breathing at 77%. She, for 3 years, breathed at 87%. She never could get to the 100% mark till 4 years later after having acute chest. So there was some, we had a child in there who had COVID, and she did pretty good with it. Not real good, but she survived and she's home. I do know of 2 people who died from COVID when it first came out, and that was because the doctor told them don't come to the hospital, and so he stayed at home and died.
Okay.
And that wasn't here in Louisville; that was somewhere else.
Okay. So really, COVID, one of the big impacts it had was that it didn't give your organization the opportunity to go out there and keep educating people. Would you say that's fair assessment?
Yes. We just couldn't. We don't want our folks to come out there because it is an underlying, it could kill them. You know, coming out during COVID, it's an underlying health, just like cancer. You know, if you have cancer, you shouldn't be around visiting anybody and everybody because your immune system is compromised.
Okay. All right. Well, look, we appreciate this time you've spent with us. Give us that website again.
thesacky.org, or check us out on Facebook, the Sickle Cell Association of Kentuckiana.
Okay.
I keep information on Facebook all the time. I have my own private sickle cell group called LCJ. And between the two, I always keep information out. My brother can tell you he's always on there, but I keep the community informed about sickle cell.
All right. Well, look, appreciate it. We will be in touch. I'll let you know when this is edited and posted. Thank you now.
Okay. All right. Have me back, Corbin.